Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Alicia Dianne Art. I'm going to be working on, actually, we're going to be talking about the third book review for our book club. So, welcome to everyone from Cartoon Art Center. We're doing a review. The book we're reading right now is Perspective Made Easy. So, this week we did, we did steps 9 through 12. So 9 through 12, it was a really quick read. It was quicker than the last few that we did, but it was really insightful. Let's see, I'll go through each step like one at a time and just like review a little bit what it talked about, and then we'll just go from there. So in number 9, we did like placing objects and placing figures, and I thought it was pretty insightful. It's something that I did already kind of feel comfortable with, I think. But just the idea of figuring out what the height is of a certain object, like in comparison to another thing. And I think that was kind of like the overall message of the entire thing was just kind of like you use other objects to determine like the height of whatever the new thing is that you're placing. So if you have a building and you're placing a person, then you would use like the height of, let's say, like 2/3 up a door, and that would be like the general height. And maybe it's a little bit more, maybe like 3/4 the height of a door would be the generic height of a person, and then you would use that height to kind of extend it out, and using those vanishing points to kind of figure out like what the height would be like moving around the page of your drawing. So I thought that was really helpful, the way that he described it. And he also used a similar thing to describe like placing other people based on the height of one person. You would use that as kind of a way to figure out the height of other people on the same page. So I thought that was interesting. Let's see. He also talked a bit about just placing objects correctly. So just making sure that you're not intersecting objects when you're placing them and spacing them apart. So that was another thing in that area. Let's see, in the next section, which would be section 10, he talked about having a central point of interest, so that you're not drawing like necessarily panoramas based on the two vanishing points. If you're doing like a 2-point perspective, you want to make sure that you're doing what your eye would actually see. So you're not doing like an extended drawing, because then it can get warped. So you have to be careful with that. That's one thing that I didn't realize. I just never, I don't think, paid attention to that. But I mean, I always kind of automatically did it within like a viewpoint. But it made sense like to clarify that it would need to be, if you're doing like a standard image size, it needs to be kept in that. So if you're doing a panorama, it really needs to be like a bigger, longer picture or whatever. You can't try to squeeze a panorama into like a smaller viewpoint. So that made sense to me. And another thing that he talked about in this section was just like when you're changing like your point of interest, you're also changing like you're changing whether it's like a 1-point or 2-point perspective. Like the same thing that we talked about the last time when we did the review was like how you have like that page that's kind of rotating. If it's dead center, it's a 1-point perspective, but as soon as you skew it a little bit, it automatically changes the perspective to like a 2-point. And it's going to be the same thing if you're like moving side to side, if you're like changing what the focal point is. So I mean, that's pretty clear. One thing that I was kind of surprised with that he brought up was just the whole idea of doing roofs that are like in a different angle as our regular 2-point. Like that's when it really got complicated. I did understand it, how he broke it down, but at first it kind of made my mind kind of turn sideways. I'm like, what is he talking about? But it did make sense in the end, because I really think this author really has a good way of breaking things down so that you can understand it. Even if you don't understand it immediately, he further breaks it down so that you can start to really get what he's talking about, which I appreciated. Let's see, in number 11, he really talked about placing objects, and he really uses this metaphor of like thinking of everything as like in terms of boxes and bricks. So like every room can basically be broken down into like a box shape, and all of the objects can kind of be simplified into like these brick forms. So I thought that was really interesting, and like it really helped me to kind of how I think about it, because it like I've talked about before, it can be really kind of complicated when we start thinking about doing perspective backgrounds. Those of us who don't have as much experience doing backgrounds, or like are fairly newer to backgrounds as like more of character designers and things like that, I think it's helpful to kind of break it down into really simplified means of explaining it. So he does that really, really well. And other things he talked about in point 12, our final point, was really how to find like the centers as like center points when we're doing things in perspective. So if you're doing anything that has requires us to make patterns and things like that, or like rug designs, or if you're doing like even like buildings and you needed to find and place windows and things like that. So he really explains it really well, and he also simplifies it in terms of like the whole idea of using that base of a brick and kind of dividing it, and really using that as sort of like a structure to be able to draw almost anything through these like very simplified shapes. I think he's just like a master at it, because it's so much simpler in the way that he describes it than how I would think about it before, or how I would approach it before. And I feel like through this so far, I feel like I can definitely do it more accurately, because I feel like most of what I've been doing was based on eyeballing things and trying to like simplify things in my own mind, but it would probably be slightly skewed or not exactly accurate. But I feel like with this, and I would tell you if I thought otherwise, if I thought this book was like totally not helpful at all, I would say that too. But I feel like for me, it's helping me to understand it a lot better. All right, so that's going to be it for our reading for this week. But next week we're doing 13, 14, 15, and 16, and I think it only goes up to 20. So we have 2 more readings, and then we'll be done with this book, and I'll move on to another book. But I hope that you guys get the book and continue reading on with me. If not, then hopefully that you find another book on perspective that's really helpful. If you have read another book on perspective that you felt like helped you, then go ahead and share that, and we can explore that as well together. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you guys in the next one. So until then, be grateful, live balanced, be yourself, and enjoy the rest of your day.